Hello everybody and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Deborah Hatswell and you're listening to BBR Investigations. At the end of tonight's show, you'll hear some surprising news about a new BBR filming project I know you'll want all of the details for, so make sure you stay until the end. Now, the cases I'm discussing with you tonight include like a female human and a growling beast in the night, and a wolfman, a bipedal canine that was seen by a camper. I'll also give you some insight on how I take these sighting reports and some background info on the cases. In an undisclosed city in the northeast of England, there's a case that is recent to BBR that came in from a young man who moved back to the area after living abroad with his family for several years. He contacted me back in 2021. We chatted back and forth in general about being experiences. But at that point, he wasn't ready to give me any of the details of his experience. And that's quite common. Even though I'm in the public eye, when you think about it, I'm a complete stranger. Most people find it hard to share with their family or their friend groups. So sharing with someone you don't know can be a real feat in itself. I know, and I empathise because I've been there. Just recently, he contacted me again and asked me what most people ask me, i.e., what's the best way to go about sharing what happened to him? What was the process? What was it involved? How confidential can I keep him and his details and what that entailed? How complicated is the process? And even though it wasn't mentioned, he probably wanted to make sure that he could trust me and that I'd keep his personal details strictly anonymous, which of course is guaranteed here at BBR Investigations. Now, not every report that comes into me becomes a case. Some people want to share it in private. They may want me to look into the area or their experience, not for the podcast, but in general, as they may need help. Or they may want to bounce some ideas and, off me really to see that their instincts are right. Others are happy to chat with me online, say via Zoom or StreamYard, and some are happy to be on camera. It's unique to each one. Then there's the matter of the best way of getting the information across. So I tend to suggest a couple of options and I'll let the witness lead me, whatever they're comfortable with. Some people prefer to contact me and type out their experiences. Others prefer a private phone call. And in some cases, I'll tape the call and type out the conversation and share it that way. And my favourite way is WhatsApp and Messenger voice apps. Voice notes and voice messages put the control into the witness's hands. Then they have the choice of what they want to say, and they can leave several messages over a number of days as they remember things or want to clarify something. I then sit down, I listen through to the notes and make a note of any questions that I have. And then I use my voice app to type out the testimony. And when the witness is ready to share, it's then that I use that testimony to make the audio for the podcast that I then share with you. And that's what happened in the cases you'll hear tonight. Now, I'm keeping the exact address the account took place in private. I don't want the witness to have people turning up at his home or questioning his neighbours. Sharing a story does not entitle all and sundry to suddenly, know every detail of your life. The witness's anonymity is tantamount, and it must remain that way, and it is always in the forefront of my mind at all times. That said, I'm incredibly grateful to our witness for sharing this event with me, as it adds to the plethora of reports in the northeast of England, and the account is terrifying. And as I share what happened that night, try to put yourself in his shoes. How would you feel if you had to swap places with him? Terror in the night. It was animalistic, like a female human and a growling beast. Witness report. Yes, Deb, I do have some experiences I find hard to explain. I'd like to tell you about them, but I don't know where to start. So I'll start with the event that took place in summer of 2020. I'd lived abroad for several years, and we moved back to our hometown in the northeast of England several years ago now. My wife had taken our child to visit her relatives out in the countryside that summer, so I was all by myself alone for the weekend. And to be honest, this house had an off feel to it. I'm not normally a person who spooks easily, but I didn't like being on my own when we first moved in. It was really warm that night and humid, as the weather that year had been very hot. I have two dogs, and sometimes at night, one or both of them will sleep on our bed with us. That night I was on my own. I was glad of the company when one of our dogs came into the room to sleep at the bottom of our bed. It was probably late as I was up watching stuff on TV. I was finding it hard to settle as it was so warm, so I left the windows open and settled down to try and get some rest. The windows at our home will swivel outwards all the way back to the wall, so the whole window frame is open and it lets in a lot of fresh, cooler air. Now, for all we live on the edge of the city centre, it's also a really green place with lots of tree coverage and natural spots around. We live just off the river in a secluded river valley, and the land runs out into the country and hillsides that surround it. We often see deer grazing or walking through in the early mornings and other wildlife around, and it's a beautiful place to live. The woodlands there and the green corridors are full of ancient forest, and there are a lot of allotments full of food. The deer use the allotments like supermarkets. The only thing between us and the river is an old abandoned building that hasn't been used in a very long time. Other than that, it's just trees and greenery. Now, in our garden, we have badgers, and I love to watch them. I study their family groups, how they move around, and what they like to eat. I've spent many happy hours just sitting there watching them. I put food out for them, and I've done that for years. I've found so many healthy badger sets within 5 minutes walk from my home. It's really hilly as the woodlands are banked around here. The whole area is very hilly, and you can use the green corridors to get through Northumberland out into the Scottish borders. Even in the city itself, the walls are surrounded by these quiet areas, and that's ideal for badgers. Unlike the rural areas, the badgers are pretty safe from roaming dogs. The folk in the city centre have their dogs on leads. As you move out further into the mining land and the farmlands, it's much harder for them to stay safe. There's so many people hunting them and others whose working dogs run loose. And on the edge of the city, people feed the badgers and foxes, so they have everything they need, on hand to not only survive but thrive. Tucked away in plain sight, like most of the towns and cities in the UK, you're only ever 5 minutes away from the countryside. Sadly, the numbers are declining here. Around 15 years ago, you'd see 8 or so in a set and moving around together. Now it's much less, and then normally in a set of 3 or so. Watching them, you realise they actually play games with the younger ones, tumbling up and down the banks in play. The foxes are the same. And at night, you hear them, you hear the owls. On that particular night, I must have dozed off. I'd been asleep for a couple of hours. My little dog's at the bottom of the bed, and I think it was somewhere between, say, 2 and 3 a.m. when my little dog, who's normally really brave and loyal, wakes me up. She's really loving, but she won't be bossed around, and up to that point, I would say nothing had ever scared her. Anyhow, as I wake up, she's standing astride me in the bed, and she's pushing down on my chest trying to wake me up. She's looking at me with a really serious, intent look on her face, but strangely, she was making no noise. Normally, she's a very vocal dog, but not tonight. Under normal circumstances, she will go berserk if she sees a person outside, or she'll set off the garden after foxes and badgers, making a racket. With an intent that wasn't clear to me, she needed me to wake up and quietly. I pushed her down gently and told her to go back to sleep, and she tried. I could feel her trying to relax, and she couldn't. I closed my eyes again, and she did exactly the same thing. She straddles me, she's pushing down on my torso. But this time, she's looking out through the window. She kept checking with me, then looking at the window, and over she did that, until she finally settled down at the end of the bed, looking intently out of the window. There's probably 1.5 meters between her and the window, and she's frozen stiff like a statue. And in the complete opposite of her usual nature, she is silent, and that unnerves me. So we're there, in the dark, with just a bit of moonlight lighting the room. She came back to me, and within seconds of her doing this, I picked up on a noise outside. I think the noise was just outside our garden boundary. It's just thick with old ancient trees in there. It's like a little glade that drops off into a woodland and it goes out into the valley. There's a choke point at the end of the lane, but other than that, there's nothing out there. There's no lighting down there either. There's a boundary wall, a fence, and a woodland bank just outside the window. And I think that this was where this weird sound was coming from. I would say from the window, at a guess, maybe 70 or 80 feet in elevation from where I am, it's down there, and that's where the noise is coming from. It was coming directly from the land outside our bedroom window. Now, I've gone over what happened next so many times in self-doubt before tonight that I feel weird sharing this. I've tried to explain it away many times and I can't. I've looked at all and any possible explanation for what happened that night and I've never found one. I was hoping I could explain it away, but nothing fits the bill so far. I know I was wide awake and I wasn't dreaming. I have told less than a handful of carefully picked people who I trust since this happened, but I can see the wheels turning as he tries to process what I'm explaining. The look of, have you lost the plot? Comes over their faces, so I just quickly change the subject and move on. I get that it's too much for them to understand, even the ones who I would say think outside the box, but I can't make what happened go away, so I just stay silent. I realised the noise I was hearing was breathing, or should I say, something breathing, and it was moving out there on the path. By this point, my little dog was lying down flat and literally lost. Didn't know what to do. She was frozen, and I've never seen her like that. She was concerned, and I'd say terrified. I was lying there, and my immediate instinct was to not let that thing know that I was here. I knew it couldn't get in, but I was terrified, and I didn't want it to know that I was there. I gently held her muzzle and stayed as still and as silent as I could. I didn't think, I just acted on impulse. We were crapping ourselves. I've never heard anything like this in my life before. It started making the most horrendous blood-curdling sounds. They were really animalistic, almost beast-like. It was a breath mixed with a snarling growl. I was obviously thinking, what the is that? I've sat out there thousands of times over the years, watching the badgers and the wildlife, and it was nothing like them. I've heard them make noises you wouldn't expect before that are bizarre, but this was clearly nothing natural. I have never heard noises like that or heard anything that terrified me to a point like that, or that had the effect on any of my dogs. This was completely different. It was loud and bellowing. It was very deep, as deep as when you hear big cats or lions fighting with each other, or when they're killing prey. The only word that came to mind then and now is beast. It sounded like a horrible beast from a horror film. But then, to make things even worse, I realised that there was a human aspect to all of this. It was a human kind of animalistic call. It was moving between that, like a human vocalization, and then that of a snarling beast. It was all over the place. And then the human aspect of it sounded female. So it was going from this really deep, beast like growling to a female human's vocalization. It's really hard to describe. I can't get it accurately, but what was close, what I would say, was a cross between groans and a scream of anguished pain. Looking back now with hindsight, even though it might sound a bit cliched, but if you'd seen the beast in the film The American Werewolf in London, when it changes from human form to the form of the beast, well, that's the only sound I could equate to what I heard that night. It sounded like a young female being. This screaming went on for 5 or 10 minutes to the point where it got louder and more aggressive as each minute passed. I could hear it walking outside the window, and thankfully I never made a sound. Myself and the dog just lay there as the screaming beast went off into the lane and down into the valley. That was the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. I've never saw anything, but that sound was enough for me. I bet we lay there a good hour before we even dared to move. How people cope when they've seen a creature is beyond me. Just hearing it was enough. I'm so grateful it didn't know I was there, and I'm grateful I didn't see it. I really didn't want to see it. It was just shocking beyond belief. Every time I think of that sound, it's blood curdling. While I was laying there, I thought the neighbours had to be hearing this. It's midsummer. Everyone's got the windows open. But lots of the homes are empty with people away for the summer holidays, and there is a lot of student accommodation around here, so there are far less people around in the summer months. Some of the larger houses have faculty staff who they take their holidays at this time of year as well. And to be honest, I wasn't prepared to go around knocking on doors, asking people if they've heard anything in the lane that night. I spent most of the time trying to explain it away. I think most people hearing this will say, well, if it was me, I'd have gone downstairs and out into the lane with a torch. And I thought I would have been the same, but that's not what I was thinking. I was acting on instinct, and my instinct told me to stay quiet. Even leaving my bed didn't enter my head. Or some people would say because it sounded female, I was probably just hearing a courting couple in the lane, but it was nothing like that. This thing sounded animalistic. Whatever was making that noise, the human part of it sounded young. I got the impression it was maybe mid to late teens in age. Not a child, but not a mature female either. It wasn't mating foxes or anything ridiculous like that. I don't know what it was, but my mind has built a picture of what I think it was. And if I ever walk the dogs later than usual, I don't walk down the lane anymore. It's so dark, I can't see my hand in front of my face. And I won't walk them later than 10:30 now. Now, there's another aspect to this story, and I think it fits with what I encountered that night. There's talk of a dogman here in Northumberland and along the Yorkshire coast. Ancient stories and new. One person was in Durham, and that story was something you featured on your podcast a while ago. I think the person said that this was a dog that was walking upright. In that tale, the creature jumps the road and goes up a steep bank. Well, the bank outside my home is a similar setup. You could be talking about the same place. It's so similar. Could there be a connection to some of the creatures other people have reported here? I believe there's probably a strong connection. Looking at the reports made in a 5-mile radius of this gentleman's home, there are several other creatures that have been seen by other people living in the area. And as I now come to expect, a large number of missing pets are reported, and several farmers who have reported large numbers of animals killed or taken from their farms have contacted the police and the newspapers. These cases radiate out in all directions. There are also reports of huge, hairy, upright creatures that run off into the woodlands, upright dog-like creatures that run off on two legs, Bigfoot creatures stalking the woodlands, and all manner of paranormal, supernatural, and otherworldly activity. Further south, we meet up with all of the Yorkshire reports of dogmen, like Old Stinker, Beast of Arnston Drain, the Peter Lee dogman account, and many others. The area our witness lives in can be accessed from all of the other cases via that green corridor along the River Wear. Now, no doubt there are other people out there with their own tales to tell, and I would love to pass them on to our witness. And I will, of course, keep you updated with any new information coming in. Now, in our next case tonight, we go south a little ways to a place in Yorkshire called Helmsley. And the Helmsley wolfman, a bipedal canine seen by a camper, this report did not come into BBR. So years ago, I'd scour any website I could find that might provide a clue or an account from someone talking about a creature report that maybe had taken place at any point over the years, I'd use search engines and references covering any activity that took place outside in the wild. So I'd go to hunting forums, fishing, camping, hiking, and of course, any blog or website that covered the so-called alternative subjects, so like 14 subjects and paranormal, UFO, things like that. That's how I found this case a number of years ago now on a 40 website. I messaged the person who left the original message, and over the years, I've tried to trace him, primarily to let him know that he's not the only person in Yorkshire that's seen the same creature as him. Sadly, I've never been able to speak with him, so I'm sharing this again today in the hopes he's listening, or that someone who knows him is listening in. But here's the story as it was written on the website, and I've just simply updated the text via a spelling app, and I've included a link to the original post in the description below. Now, the man who left the comment, his name on the site was Curious George, and he said, "I've posted in the cryptozoology forum asking for information. My experience goes back to 2 years ago in 2013 when I was staying in North Yorkshire and I saw what I can only describe as a werewolf. I'm a logical person, and to me, they don't exist outside of something from, say, a horror film or science fiction. But after hearing what I heard and then seeing it for myself, I now believe differently. I've Google searched for information ever since it happened to see if anyone had seen anything in that area that might explain it away, but I've never found anything. It's the first time I've posted, as obviously, posting that I've seen a werewolf would leave my post open to ridicule. Put it this way, I won't camp out on the moors again. I went for a walk outside my motorhome. I can only describe hearing what was blood-curdling howls, exactly as you'd imagine from a movie. I heard them to the side of me at first, so I decided to walk back to my van. And then the howls were in front of me. So yeah, I started to do a fast walk. And then I saw the shape of something shaggy that was moving on two legs. It was behind my motorhome and it was standing upright. It was about 6 feet tall, all shaggy with glowing red eyes, and it stood on two legs. It was not a dog. It was far too big for that. I had dogs my entire life, and I have never heard a howl as deep or as loud as this. And to be honest, I've never heard my dogs howl. Now, there was no one around for miles, and I'm in a pretty remote place. I saw no animals, no farm cattle. It was exactly as you'd imagine from the horror movies, but I didn't see it up close. Instead, I legged it as fast as I could. I saw the shape of it from a distance. I heard it following me, and it was moving off to the side of me, so it moved pretty quick. It was wandering outside my van for a while. I'd say a good 20 minutes. It sounded like it was underneath the van at one point. And to be honest, I sat there quietly and was too scared to look out the window. No one was playing a prank on me. In the morning, I went outside and there was nothing around, no evidence. I went to the spot where it had been standing, and that's where I got the estimate that it was about, say, 6 feet tall. I had lit a fire earlier outside, so I'm presuming seeing a fire in the middle of nowhere attracted it. It was foggy. It wasn't camping season, and there was only me out there in the camper van. I saw no footprints around the van in the morning. Nothing. And for all, there are many ridiculous and obtrusive comments left on his post, yeah. There were some people who reached out to share their experiences with dog or wolf-like creatures. One person reached out to Josh to share an encounter they were aware of at an undisclosed location. She said, "I'd like to tell you what happened to my spouse. Maybe it'll be useful somehow after the experience you had. Years ago, he and a friend were camping in the open field at night when he saw a huge red-eyed wolf that came charging and leaping at him. He screamed. His friend, surprisingly, did not react to the wolf, but responded by whispering, 'Shh,' and pointing at the van. According to the friend, he did not see the wolf, but instead, he saw something tall and white that was vaguely human-shaped walking around the corner of the van at the same time. Both shapes disappeared in the next moment. Both men jumped into the van and hid, terrified. They could both hear something moving in the grass outside. Suddenly, they both experienced a presence that was with them in the van, as if an invisible person was staring at them at very close range. They were both scared out of their minds, so they started the van and drove at least a mile before the feeling of being watched dissipated. They described it as the most frightening thing that had ever happened to them. He later did some research on the area and found that the land had once been the territory of the people of the wolf. I mention all this because my spouse has no doubt that to this day he saw a wolf. His friend saw something completely different. Whatever it was might have appeared to each of them differently. Whatever it was scared the hell out of them regardless. I'm not necessarily saying you saw an apparition that only looked like a werewolf. The fact that you heard howling indicates it was something more corporeal. But any avenue of investigation might yield some insight, she said. Now, the stories we've heard so far have some glaring similarities, don't they? The first that jumps to mind is that all of these witnesses are lone males. They all happened in the evening hours when it was time for the men to bed down. Each and every one of them heard the creature, and it didn't seem to be trying to remain unheard. In fact, quite the opposite. They all happened within 5 miles of town, out in Greenbelt land and on the moors. So places where we don't have a lot of people travelling. Another thing to note, the road up from Helmsley is a direct route to Teesside. So from there, you're virtually on the River Wey, and we can connect to the dogman sightings on the northeast coast, and also to our witness who heard the female snarling. Could our witnesses be dealing with similar creatures? Because there is clearly more than one, as the first creature sounded female, and that was not mentioned in the other 2 cases. So we can assume the creatures in those reports were male. I've heard reports of female werewolves, a dogman, but they are extremely rare. The only other encounter of a female dogman that I know is one that I heard happen in the US when 2 young girls who lived in Vermont were playing in a tree fort just in the woods out of sight of the main house. A figure came from the woods, and to the girls' horror, a female dogman joined them in the tree fort and protectively put its arms around them both. It was terrifying for both girls. One girl recalled the being appeared to be smiling at them. The younger girl was traumatised, and the other older one lived at home where the event took place. She had a mind for details and instinctively knew that they weren't in any danger from this particular being, but was worried there might be others nearby. I think it's finally just left, when they were being called by their parents. Werewolf hunter Charles Christian has written a book about the werewolves and the dogman reports on the northeast coast corridor, and he said, this part of the country was once infested with wolves. Up until the 18th century, there was still a wolf bounty for anyone killing them. It was known for the wolves to dig up corpses from the graveyards. When people would glimpse the wolves, they thought they were maybe the lights from a carriage. It would instead reveal itself to be an animalistic wolf with red eyes. The area's problem was recognised as early as 937 AD. Let me say that again, people. 937 AD. Don't tell me there's no history of them in the UK. And it was King Alfredson who granted the building of a hostel to provide travellers with shelter from these wolf attacks. Anyone on the road would have been particularly wary of Wolf Moneth, the Saxon name for January, when the creatures, starved of the easy pickings of livestock, would turn to human prey. You were more likely to be eaten than any other time of the year. The hostel was built near Saxton Hill, called Spittal Hoe in North Yorkshire. Its purpose was to protect travellers from wolf attacks. The wolves around Spittal Hoe were reportedly so intelligent, people started to believe they were somehow human and that they had the power to transform into wolves during the night. Don't be fooled into thinking it's just a North East Coast thing. It's not just the North East Coast that has a host of horrible creatures. There are reports of dog-like creatures all across the UK. The chilling tale of the Windsor werewolf. Now, former Berkshire policeman Brian Langston shared a story in November of 2000 about two Windsor police officers, PC Tom Walters and PC Lucy Palmer, who were on patrol in the early hours of the morning when they encountered a strange wolf-like creature. The officers are said to have encountered the enormous wolf-like beast, their words not mine, in their headlights in the car park of Windsor Leisure Pool in Stowell Road. The beast is said to have escaped towards the river. I think that's important and we need to pick up on that. PC Palmer is quoted as saying, "It looked too big to be a dog and seemed irritated that we disturbed it. It had an odd gait and it walked towards the river where it vanished." Well, the plot thickens as a similar beast had been spotted at the same spot at Bulter's Lock in 1990. So, that's a difference of 10 years, isn't it? And it was spotted by another police officer, PC Gail Emptage, who was on a late night burglary patrol. She was cycling along the river near Raymead Road when she saw a creature she thought was a large shaggy dog. She said, "It was so big that my first thought was that it must be a St. Bernard. As it loped across the road just 20 feet ahead of me, it was clearly illuminated by the street lightning, and I could see it had the appearance of a large, huge wolf. There was no doubt in my mind it was solid and real." She said the beast had an air of arrogance and almost human-like intelligence. She said its eyes terrified her, adding, "They glowed with an intense yellow-green luminosity, fixed their glare on me for several seconds." And she added, "They were like two torch beams, and nothing like any dog I've ever seen before." Each and every one of the reports I've shared with you tonight took place very close to or alongside a river or a waterway. Add that to the theory that dogmen can manipulate water molecules known as hydrokinesis or aquakinesis. Could this be the reason so many of them are seen very close to our homes and waterways? Are they using the water to come and go from our world, or to change the vibration of an area, maybe to call in others, to help defend or attack a common enemy, or to mate, or to find mates? Was this the reason for the mournful, anguished cries of our first witness that he heard? I don't know. I can't answer that. But all across the UK, from the top of Scotland to the tip of Cornwall, and even out onto the islands, there are stories dating back to the 1st century AD of wolves, werewolves, wolvers, whatever name you want to put on them, in the UK. Adding to that, all the tales of shucks, red-eyed dogs and yellow-eyed dogs and demons in the wood at night and snarling black dogs. The stories are out there and we have to accept that, and we have to make it normal for people to be able to report what they've seen. I took a report via WhatsApp just last week, and it was a gentleman. It was Easter Sunday. It was about 2 a.m. in the morning, and he was walking in a busy town of Portsmouth when he saw what he described as a creature that opened up from a portal in the ground, came out, and took off down the street moving at speed. So if you've got a case like that you're really not sure about sharing, just get in touch with me using the links below and we'll have a little private chat about it, even if it's just an email. And you might want to do what these people have done tonight. So I know that you really enjoy my content, and for years I've strived to bring you top quality experiences using my very limited tech. Well, I have a huge surprise and an announcement to make, as BBR, in conjunction with the Paranormal TV unit, I've launched a new YouTube channel bringing you even more in-depth witness interviews at the scene of the event. Now, the Paranormal TV unit have 20 years of TV experience, and what they bring to the channel is amazing. You will be able to see behind the scenes as I work my cases, accompanied by a full film and audio crew. This is a new venture for me, and one I am incredibly proud of, and I'm really proud of what we've put together. What is this new channel called, and when can you see it? Well, as you know, I offer complete confidentiality to all of our witnesses, and the new show will reflect that. So for now, we're going with Strictly Confidential with Deborah Hatswell, where you can appear not in shot. We can change your voice, we can edit you out. Any way that you want to come forward with your report and join the hundreds of people who are doing this, just reach out to us. We are shooting episodes as we speak, and the Paranormal TV unit are working away in the editing suite and organising more shoots and interviews, which means any day now we'll be ready to go live and public for free worldwide. Friday, I'm out in Buxton filming at a spot that I know people have heard me speak about, Cowdale Corner, where Kane dreamt about his accident 4 days before it happened. But I'll bring you more on that one. So, hit those links in the description to take you to all of the sites I've mentioned tonight. You'll find links to all my social media and podcasting sites. You'll find links to the Paranormal TV unit channel. And as soon as I can, I'll add the link to the new show, Strictly Confidential with Deborah Hatswell. So keep an eye out for updates on all of my new upcoming projects for 2023 and 2024. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you'll join me for future episodes. I release content like this every week, and I'm sure I'll cover a topic you enjoy, so don't miss out. Hit that follow or like button. Please check out my YouTube and Patreon memberships for early or exclusive content, and you can find the link to them and my social media and donation sites in one handy link tree below. BBR is not funded, so any donation, no matter how small, is highly appreciated. So I will bid you adieu, and I will be back at the same time, the same day, with more from the BBR case files.